No one noticed that it was just past 10 on a cold Monday morning when a man wearing faded jeans and an old navy blue hoodie and a pair of scuffed sneakers stepped out of a beat-up Nissan and walked slowly toward the gleaming glass doors of a Tesla dealership in Palo Alto. The cars outside sparkled under the soft winter sun, polished to perfection. The showroom looked like something out of a dream, sleek, futuristic, and intimidating. Yet the man walking toward it was anything but. He paused just before entering, looking up at the bold red Tesla logo above the door. A deep breath escaped him, quiet but weighted. No one could have guessed that the man behind the hood was Sundar Pichai, the CEO of one of the world's most powerful tech companies. He wasn't here as himself. Not today. Sundar had always believed in staying grounded, even as he sat in meetings. That shaped the future of global technology, even as billions of devices ran on platforms he helped build. He never forgot who he was or where he came from. Growing up in a modest two-room apartment in Chennai, India, he had once walked miles just to find a phone that worked. Now he was leading teams that connected the planet. But that journey had taught him something deeper than innovation. It had taught him humility. Today, he wasn't here to test drive a car or to invest in another venture. He was here to learn, to see how people were treated when no one knew their name, to feel again what it meant to be invisible. As he stepped inside, the warmth of the showroom wrapped around him like a veil. Smooth jazz played low in the background, and sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows on the polished floor. Cars sat like sculptures on raised platforms. A young man at the front desk glanced at Sundar, then quickly looked away. No smile, no greeting. Sundar walked slowly, absorbing everything. He moved toward a red Model S, the kind of car that spoke without words, elegant, fast, expensive. His hand hovered near the door handle when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, sir," a woman said. Her tone clipped. "Please don't touch the vehicles unless you're accompanied by a sales associate." He turned to face her. She was in her early 30s, perfectly dressed, with a sharp bob haircut and a tablet in her hands. Her eyes scanned him quickly, taking in his hoodie, his shoes, the wear on his jeans. "I was just looking." Sundar replied quietly. "Looking is fine," she said, not unkindly, but with that unmistakable edge of judgment. "Just don't touch anything. These cars aren't casual." He nodded and stepped back, his hands in his pockets. Around him, other customers milled about, men in tailored suits, couples in designer jackets, teenagers taking selfies near the Cybertruck. Sundar noticed how easily the staff floated toward them, offering smiles, water, brochures. He noticed how none of them looked his way again. A memory rose in his mind, uninvited. He was 12, standing outside a high-end electronics shop in Chennai, barefoot, peering through the glass at a TV he could never afford. The clerk inside had come out, waved him off like a stray dog. Back then, he had turned away quietly. Shame. Burning his cheeks. Today, the shame didn't burn, but something else did. A quiet disappointment. Not in them. In the world. In how little things had changed. Sundar wandered to the back of the showroom, where a lonely display explained the car's autopilot features. A little boy tugged at his mother's coat nearby, asking 100 questions about Tesla, electricity, and space travel. Sundar smiled to himself, listening. The boy reminded him of himself, curious, eager, overflowing with dreams. He sat down a nearby bench just to observe. His phone buzzed in his pocket, 3 missed calls from his assistant. He ignored them. This moment, this space, was something he had to experience without interruption. After nearly 20 minutes, he noticed a young woman approach. Her badge read Emily. She looked different from the others, less polished, more sincere. She hesitated before speaking. "Hi there," she said gently. "You've been sitting here a while. Is there anything I can help you with?" He looked up at her, meeting her eyes. She didn't look past him. She looked at him. Trying to understand how things work here, he said softly. She nodded. It can feel overwhelming. Lots of information. Lots of shiny things. But really, it's about people. That's what I think anyway. Something in her voice made him pause. She wasn't selling a car. She was connecting. Do you like working here? He asked Dot. She glanced around before answering. I do, but I also see things. How people are treated. How quick judgments happen. I try to change that when I can. He smiled. It wasn't often he was surprised by someone. What would you do? If someone important walked in, but looked ordinary, he asked. She tilted her head thoughtfully. I'd treat them the same. Same as everyone. Because what if they were having a hard day? Or hiding who they were on purpose? Or just wanted to feel human without all the layers people pile on? A silence passed between them, full and warm. What's your name? She asked. He hesitated. Sundar. She extended her hand. Nice to meet you, Sundar. They shook hands, and in that small gesture, something shifted. He felt seen. Not as the CEO, not as the billionaire, but as a man. And just as they began to talk, just as Emily started to share her own story, a voice boomed from behind. Emily, step away from that man. He's not a customer. It was the woman from earlier, her tone sharp with authority. Emily turned, startled. Sundar stood up slowly. I was just talking to him, Emily said, trying to explain. He doesn't belong here. The woman snapped. You should know better. But Sundar didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a slow, calm smile that held centuries of grace. Maybe, he said, looking her in the eye. Or maybe you just don't know who I am. And as the woman blinked, confused, Emily's eyes widened slightly. She didn't say a word, but something clicked. She didn't need him to prove anything. Somehow, she already knew Dot, and that was when a black Tesla pulled up outside the glass doors. A man in a suit stepped out, talking into a headset, scanning. The showroom with urgency. Dot double quotes, Mr. Pichai. The man called out, stepping inside. Dot heads turned. The room went still. Dot the woman from earlier paled. But Sundar said, nothing. He just looked at Emily. Thank you, he said quietly. And as he turned to walk toward the man waiting for him, the entire dealership stood frozen, held in the silence of something they didn't yet understand. But Emily understood. She smiled. And that's when the alarm went off. The red lights flashed. Dot. A voice crackled over the intercom, and everyone began to run. Asterisk. The moment the doors locked, alarm was loud, too loud. It pierced the calm like a scream in the middle of a prayer. The elegant showroom, where minutes ago people had been sipping sparkling water and admiring carbon fiber finishes, was now chaos. Lights that once illuminated the cars now pulsed red, flashing in urgent rhythm across the high ceilings. The calm, confident atmosphere cracked open like thin glass under pressure. Emily jumped at the sound, instinctively stepping closer to Sundar. The woman who had scolded him earlier looked stunned, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. The man who had just arrived, wearing a navy suit and a Bluetooth headset, moved toward Sundar quickly, eyes scanning for threats. We need to get you out of here, the man said, voice low and serious. But Sundar didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the main doors. They had just locked with a mechanical hiss. The dealership had gone into full lockdown mode. Somewhere behind the reception desk, a voice was crackling over a security speaker, garbled, panicked, impossible to understand. Staff were running to control panels. Customers stood frozen near. The display vehicles, unsure whether this was a drill, a glitch, or something worse. A child started to cry. What's going on? Emily asked, trying to stay calm. The man in a suit glanced at her. Unauthorized access breach. Standard protocol. No one gets in or out until security clears the system. Sundar frowned. Unauthorized. Access where? The back server room, the man said, lowering his voice further. Someone tripped the system. Could be a hack attempt. Emily looked between them. You think someone tried to break into Tesla's network? The man didn't answer. Sundar, though, understood immediately. Tesla wasn't just a car company, it was a data company. Inside every vehicle was a treasure trove of information, from navigation patterns to driver habits. Someone trying to access that meant danger, not just to cars, but to people. As the minutes ticked on, the tension in the room grew thicker. The once smooth salespeople were now clearly out of their depth. One tried to calm a group of customers by offering free test drives once the system resets. Another was frantically tapping her tablet. But the screen kept flashing red dots. Sundar quietly walked to the glass wall that looked out over the parking lot. He pressed a hand to the glass. Outside, a black van had stopped at the curb. It had no markings. The windows were tinted, and no one was stepping out. He turned back to the man in the suit. "You need to check who's in that van." The man looked, then tapped his headset. "Roger. Send 2 to the north lot. Verify that black vehicle. No tags." As the team outside moved into action, Sundar glanced back toward Emily, who was now guiding a few customers to sit down, trying to distract a crying child by asking about his favorite electric car. She had natural calm, compassion, leadership. It struck Sundar as strange how someone like her wasn't the one running the place. The woman who had dismissed him earlier now stood nervously by the front desk, her phone at her ear, whispering sharply into it. Suddenly, the lights changed again. The red glow faded. Normal light returned. The alarm silenced. A voice over the intercom finally spoke clearly. "Lockdown lifted. Incident contained. All staff resume standard procedure." A wave of relief passed through the room, but it didn't erase the fear. What just happened? Someone near the Cybertruck asked. "Just a system check." One of the salesmen lied, trying to laugh it off. These things happen. But Sundar knew better. That wasn't just a glitch. Someone had tried something and failed. "For now, we're getting out of here," the man in the suit said to Sundar, moving toward the door now that it had unlocked. But Sundar hesitated. He turned to Emily. "Can you step outside with me? Just for a moment?" She looked surprised. "Sure, of course." Outside, the air felt sharper, crisper. The black van was gone. They stood near the old Nissan Sundar had arrived in. For a moment, they said nothing. "That wasn't just an accident," Emily said quietly. "No," Sundar agreed. "It wasn't." She turned to him. "Who are you really?" His answer came slowly. Someone who needed to remember what it felt like to be unseen, unimportant, to feel what others feel every day. She looked at him for a long moment. "And did you?" "Yes," he said. "But you saw me, and that matters." Her face softened, but she wasn't done. "What will you do now?" He didn't answer right away. The question ran deeper than she knew. "Maybe I'll come back," he said. "Not as who I am, but as who I was." Before she could ask more, his phone buzzed again. "This time," he answered. The voice on the other end spoke rapidly. "We traced the breach," the voice said. It came from inside the dealership, not a hacker from outside. It was someone on the floor. Someone with admin access. Sundar's eyes narrowed. "Get names," he said quietly. "And check the employee logs." He hung up and looked back at the glass doors. Inside, the woman who had judged him stood frozen in conversation with another staff member. Her eyes were darting towards Sundar, then away, nervous. "I think I know where this leads," Sundar said. To Emily, she raised an eyebrow. "And? It's going to be ugly," he replied. "But the truth usually is." She gave a faint smile. "Do you want help?" He looked at her. "Yes. I think you already started." A silence settled again. But then, from inside the showroom, came a scream. One of the computers near the desk sparked violently. A thin trail of smoke began to rise. People shouted. And just as Sundar and Emily turned to run back inside, the lights flickered once more. But this time, they didn't turn red. They went completely dark. Asterisk shadows in the cold darkness swallowed the dealership in an instant. Gone were the pulsing lights, the hum of electricity, the soft music that had once filled the air. Silence pressed against the walls like a weight, thick and unnatural, For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Only the thin trail of smoke curling from the desk-mounted computer reminded them that something had gone terribly wrong. Then came the first sound glass clinking softly as someone knocked over a display stand. A child whimpered. Footsteps echoed strangely as people began shifting in the dark, unsure whether to stay or run. Someone pulled out their phone and activated the flashlight, casting a thin white beam across the floor. Sundar and Emily were already moving. They stepped back through the glass doors, now cracked open, and into the now shadowed showroom. The air inside had changed. It smelled of burning plastic and fear. "Don't touch anything," Sundar said, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't a normal system failure." "Do you think it's connected to the breach?" Emily asked, staying close behind. "I don't think anything about this is a coincidence," he replied. The man in the suit reappeared, a small flashlight in hand. "We've got engineers en route," he said, "but whatever this is, it's targeted. Every networked system just shut down. The Tesla grid, the security system, even the climate control. It's like someone flipped a switch." Sundar's brow furrowed. "This building runs on a smart power system. That means someone had to override multiple protocols to pull this off." The man nodded grimly. "We've locked down all remote access, but the damage may already be done." As their voices bounced quietly through the showroom, another scream rang out. This time, it came from the back offices they ran. Sundar led the way, weaving past idle cars and stunned customers. Emily followed close, her phone flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. The man in the suit barked orders into his headset, but the connection had gone dead. They found a young woman collapsed near the rear hallway, breathing hard, her face pale. A desk had fallen beside her, papers scattered across the tile floor. Sundar knelt beside her. "What happened?" he asked. Someone was back there," she whispered. "I saw a shadow near the server room. I thought it was another employee, but when I called out, they ran, and then, boom, everything went blank." Sundar helped her sit upright. He turned to the man in the suit. "We need to get to the server room, now." They moved quickly down the hallway, past locked doors and storage closets. The server room was at the end, behind a reinforced glass panel and a biometric scanner. Or at least it had been. The scanner was now charred. The panel shattered. Someone had forced their way in. The inside of the server room was a disaster. Cables dangled like severed veins, blinking lights were frozen mid-pattern, and a faint acrid smell hung in the air-burnt electronics. One of the racks had been pulled open. A small device, no bigger than a flash drive, blinked red at its center. "What is that?" Emily asked, stepping closer. Sundar's eyes widened. "It's a piggyback bypass tool. Not something off the shelf. Someone brought this with a purpose to extract data, or inject code, or both." "How do you know so much about it?" she asked. He hesitated. "Because, we found them before. At Google. They're used by people who know how to hide things in plain sight." The man in the suit swore under his breath. This was never a casual break-in. They knew exactly where to go, what to take. They walked through the front door. Emily looked up slowly. "Then it was an inside job." Sundar nodded. "Yes, and we need to figure out who." They sealed the room, cutting off any further tampering. But it was clear damage had already been done. Whoever had broken in had a short window, 5, maybe 6 minutes. But in the world of beta, that was more than enough time to plant something that could spread into the wider network beyond Tesla. Into homes, into cities, into anything connected. As the three of them returned to the showroom floor, the power flickered back on, slowly. First the lights, humming to life. Then the displays. Finally, the touchscreens on the cars themselves. The dealership stirred, blinking its way back into consciousness. But things didn't feel right. Sundar stopped in front of the red Model S again, the one he admired earlier. Its screen was flashing a message that hadn't been there before. System reboot required. Unknown software detected. "Please contact administrator." He leaned in and tapped the screen. It didn't respond. Then Another message appeared, only for a second. Hello, Sundar. We see you. His breath caught. He looked up, eyes sweeping the room. Who had written that? Who knew he was here? How deep did this go? He turned back to Emily. We're not dealing with just theft. Someone sending a message. She frowned. Why target you? Not just me, he said quietly. But people like me? People with power who forget that silence doesn't mean safety? Someone wants to remind us. At that moment, a group of corporate security officers entered the building, finally responding to the earlier alerts. They moved with practiced precision, but Sundar could tell by the confusion in their eyes that they were already behind. The man in the suit stepped forward to brief them. Sundar and Emily stepped away, toward the side of the showroom. What do we do now? She asked. He looked at her, eyes thoughtful. We traced the message, find the source. And while they think they're watching me, I'll be watching them. Why? You? She asked again. He took a breath. Because I used to build walls to keep people out. Now I see the cracks. And someone just walked through one. As they stood in the fading light of the winter afternoon, the dealership slowly returned to its polished normalcy. Salespeople began to recover their rehearsed charm. Customers left, shaken but curious. Managers whispered quietly, pretending things were fine. But Sundar and Emily knew better. Somewhere out there, someone was still watching, and the next move would be theirs. Just as they turned to leave, a young man in a service uniform stepped out of a side hallway. He had a clipboard in hand and a look of polite curiosity on his face. You're Sundar Pichai, right? He asked. Sundar paused. Double quotes. Yes, he said. Why do you ask? The young man smiled, but something in his eyes was off. Someone left this for you. He held out a small, sealed envelope, cream-colored, unmarked. Sundar took it slowly. The young man turned and walked away without another word. Inside the envelope, on a single sheet of plain paper, were 6 words typed in a basic sans serif font. This is only the first test. Asterisk the message beneath the silence. The envelope felt too light to carry any real threat. Yet Sundar couldn't ignore how heavy it sat in his hand. 6 words on a blank sheet. No sender, no signature, no return address. This is only the first test. The words played over and over in his mind like a distant drumbeat, not loud enough to cause panic, but too steady to forget. Asterisk. He stood in the quiet corner of the dealership as the chaos faded behind him. The red models now sat idle, screen dark again. Employees had returned to their routines, but their laughter was hollow, their smiles stretched thin. The staff tried to forget. The customers tried to pretend nothing strange had happened. But Sundar and Emily stood apart from the illusion. She leaned over slightly, reading the message. This doesn't sound like a warning. It sounds like a promise. Sundar nodded slowly. And it's personal. Someone didn't just want to test the system. They wanted to test me. Why here? She asked. Why today? You didn't tell anyone you were coming. That's what bothers me most, he replied, folding the paper carefully and sliding it into his pocket. Someone knew. Someone close enough to track me in real time. And they used this place because it was vulnerable. Maybe they expected me to walk away quietly. But you didn't, she said. Double quotes. No, he agreed. Because they made it personal. The man in the suit returned, his expression tight. We've reviewed the footage. Internal cameras went down at the exact same time as the breach. Complete blackout for 13 minutes. Whoever did this knew exactly how long it would take for physical response teams to arrive. Sundar raised an eyebrow. Any logs? Activity from employee accounts? Yes. 1 login during the breach window, he said. But it was scrubbed. Name erased. Only the terminal number remains. Workstation 7. Customer support bay. Emily spoke up. That's me. I use Workstation 7. The air thickened. Sundar looked at her. When was the last time you logged in? This morning. Just before you walked in, she said. But I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Just looked up a test drive schedule and sent a few internal memos. Did you leave it unlocked? He asked gently. She hesitated. Maybe. I might have stepped away when the alarm first triggered. Everything happened so fast. Then someone used your session, Sundar said. They wanted it to trace back to someone trustworthy, someone who wouldn't suspect anything. Emily swallowed hard. So they're trying to frame me. Or hide behind you, he said. Either way, they knew who'd pick. She looked away, breathing slowly, trying not to let it show how much that stung. This isn't your fault, Sundar added. Or whoever's behind this, they're not just smart, they're calculating. They picked the perfect moment, the perfect tool, and now they're watching to see what I do next. The man in the suit leaned in. We could go public. Warn other tech partners. Lock down the network. Inform Tesla security. No, Sundar interrupted. Not yet. If we act too fast, we scare them into hiding. If we wait, we might learn. More. Wait for what? Emily asked, voice quiet but firm. Sundar looked at her. Another message. They left the dealership quietly that evening, long after most staff had gone home. The sun had dipped beneath the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of ash and lavender. The city lights were beginning to flicker on, but Sundar didn't notice. His mind was already turning, tracing patterns, possibilities. Digital shadows hiding inside physical spaces. They drove in silence. Emily had offered to ride with him, partly because she didn't trust anyone else. Partly because she was still caught in the gravity of something far bigger than she understood. Sundar stared out the window. They know me. They're not just targeting the company. This is a message to me. And if they're testing me, it means they've studied me. What kind of test? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded printout. It was a list of product timelines projects across different companies that intersected with AI, autonomous systems, and neural networks. He handed it to her. This is everything we've touched in the last year that connects to transportation. Energy and data infrastructure, he said. Now ask yourself, what if someone didn't want to stop one company? What if they wanted to rewrite how all of us work together? Emily read through the list, her eyes widening. This isn't just about cars. No, Sundar said. It's about control. Who has it? Who loses it? And who decides? They arrived at a quiet office building, the kind that looked abandoned after hours. But inside, a private task force waited cybersecurity analysts, engineers, and trusted insiders. Sundar didn't call it a war room. But it was as they entered. One of the engineers stood up. We traced the piggyback device from the dealership, she said. It pinged a server in Europe. Unregistered, bouncing through 6 proxies. Can you get through? Sundar asked. Working on it, she said. But it's not just encrypted, it's reactive. Like it's learning from our attempts. Emily stepped forward. It's AI. Maybe, the engineer said. Or someone built it to look like AI. Sundar walked to the center of the room and placed the envelope on the table. We're being challenged by someone who understands systems, both digital and human. They think we're slow, distracted, too. Big to notice the cracks. You looked around. They're wrong. The room fell silent. And then a new alert flashed across the main. Monitor. Incoming message. Decrypted fragment. Locatelli opened it. 4 lines of plain text. The old paths lead nowhere the towers. You built our hollow, we will not knock again. Next time, we enter through the root snow sender. No trace. Emily read it out loud. Sundar closed his eyes. They're not just hackers, he said softly. They're trying to make a point. What point? Emily asked. He opened his eyes again. But everything we've built is breakable. And as the team sat in the silence that followed, somewhere deep in the network, a second beacon activated. But this time, it wasn't pointing at Sundar. It was pointing at someone else. Someone even higher. Asterisk. The voice from the tower. The room smelled faintly of heated circuit boards and late-night coffee. A dozen monitors bathed the faces of the team in shifting colors, code streams, server maps, threat graphs. Yet no one moved, no one spoke. All eyes were fixed on a blinking signal in the top right corner of the central screen. Unlike before, this new signal didn't try to hide. It was loud in its simplicity, bold in its defiance. Beacon 2, active. Coordinates traced. Zurich, Switzerland. Sundar stood still, his mind already spinning into motion. They weren't just taunting him anymore, they were expanding. And if this new signal came from Zurich, he already had a sinking suspicion about what it meant. He turned to Emily, who was scanning the message again on her tablet. "What's in Zurich?" she asked. His voice was steady. "Data refuge." Her eyes narrowed. "You mean that old Cold War facility? The one that got turned into a private server farm?" He nodded. "Yes, 200 meters underground. Climate-controlled, AI-reinforced firewalls. A place where the world's most sensitive data is kept. Nuclear treaties, global banking records, even fragments of quantum encryption research. Most people don't know it exists. But the people who matter, the ones who design the next 50 years, they do." A silence passed through the room. For the first time, someone behind a keyboard whispered the word everyone was beginning to think. Espionage. Sundar didn't reply. He didn't need to dot the word hung in the air like smoke. 14 hours later. Sundar stood in front of a reinforced steel door inside a decommissioned mountain in the Swiss Alps. It was early morning, the air still and cold, the sun barely peeking. Over the snowy ridges, they had flown in on a quiet jet, under aliases with no corporate logos, no fanfare. Just 3 people: Sundar, Emily, and a local security analyst named Tobias, who didn't ask questions. Inside the mountain, the hallway. Lights hummed. Cameras tracked their movement. The closer they got to the core, the more the temperature dropped. Like the place wanted them to know it was built to preserve, not welcome. The beacon activated from a private cluster node, Tobias explained as they walked. The only people with access to that node are 7 global clients. 2 are governments. 1 is a defense contractor. The others are private institutions, including us. Emily looked sideways at Sundar. "Us as in your company?" "Yes," he said quietly. They reached the final door. 2 biometric scans later, they stepped into a room lined with tall black server racks, humming like quiet giants in the dark. On a nearby console, a new message blinked. "Access breach recorded. Data siphon, unknown." Sundar leaned in, reading the details. 10 seconds of access. Just 10. But in that time, the system had copied partial encryption keys. Not full files, just fragments. Enough to unlock something bigger if someone had the missing parts. They didn't want data, Emily whispered. They wanted a map. Tobias turned. "A map to what?" Sundar's voice dropped to almost nothing. "A map to everything." They stepped back into the hall, heads still racing. Sundar could feel it like a storm building in the distance. Something massive was coming, and every step they took toward the truth only confirmed how deeply buried it was. He looked at Emily. "I need to tell you something I should have said earlier." Asterisk. "Okay," she said cautiously. "This isn't the first time someone tried to test me," he said. "Years ago, when I took the helm at Google, a group sent a similar message. Not as advanced, more of a warning than an attack. They called themselves the Tower. Like the message said," she recalled. "The towers you built are hollow." He nodded. They believe modern technology, especially AI and data control, is a threat. Not just politically, morally. They think we've passed a line we were never meant to cross. And they think you're part of the problem. "I am," he said honestly, in their eyes. They were quiet again as they left the server vault. The mountain echoed with every step. By the time they returned to the surface, the sun had risen fully, casting light over the snow-covered peaks. But the chill inside Sundar didn't fade. His phone buzzed out another message. "You came, you followed. You're predictable, but you still don't understand. We don't want your empire. We want to burn the blueprint." Emily read over his shoulder. "They're accelerating." Sundar turned slowly toward her. "And they've just told us their real goal." "What do you mean?" "They're not trying to steal data. They're trying to destroy the foundation that holds it all together. Not for money, not for power, for principle. As they drove back toward the helipad, Sundar stared out the window, lost in the quiet beauty of the Alps. His mind wasn't on the mountains. It was on the blueprint. Not the digital one, the human one. Who was behind this? Not the faceless group, but the mind. The one voice guiding all of this. Then a memory flickered into place. An old meeting. Brilliant engineer. Someone who had vanished years ago after walking out of a tense boardroom presentation, saying only one thing. We're building weapons and calling them progress. He had thought she'd disappeared into obscurity. But now a sinking feeling rose in his chest. What if she hadn't disappeared? What if she'd gone underground? Back in California, the team waited for his call. As the encrypted video chat connected, the screen showed the headquarters war room. The engineer who had traced the beacon in part 4 leaned forward. "We got a match," she said. The second beacon led us to a shell company. That company was registered by a private foundation. And the foundation's founding document was signed by her. Sundar finished. "Yes," the engineer confirmed. "Dr. Annika Reddy? You remember her?" He closed his eyes. How could I forget? Emily leaned closer to the screen. "Who is she?" Sundar opened his eyes again, slowly. She was the one person who challenged everything we did. She used to say we were trying to teach machines to feel before we taught humans to understand. And what happened to her? Emily asked. We told her to fall in line. She walked away. He didn't mention the full truth, that her final presentation had predicted almost everything happening now. The rise of shadow networks, the collapse of trust in centralized systems, the slow replacement of human empathy with machine logic. At the time, no one had listened, and now she was back, but not alone. He looked at Emily. This isn't just about Tesla, or me, or even data. Then what is it? He exhaled. It's about the future. Who gets to write it? And somewhere, across oceans and firewalls, a camera switched on in a hidden room. A woman stepped into view, calm, clear-eyed. Resolute. She smiled into the lens. Hello, Sundar. She whispered. Asterisk. The choice no one sees room was dim, but not dark. Soft light spilled from old filament bulbs dangling from long cords above. It wasn't a boardroom. It wasn't a server room. It wasn't a bunker. It was a space that felt human, imperfect, wires exposed. Notebooks stacked on rough wooden shelves. No logo, no brand. In the center stood a table. At one end, Sundar Pichai sat in silence. At the other, Dr. Annika Reddy waited. They hadn't spoken yet. Not with words. The silence between them carried years of unfinished arguments, ghosted emails, torn-up visions of the future. The walls were lined with screens, each showing fragments of the world they'd helped build. A neural traffic system in Tokyo, an AI court analytics project in London, a predictive climate grid in sub-Saharan Africa. Beautiful systems, powerful, efficient, and now at risk of being erased. Annika finally broke the silence. You look tired, she said, her voice calm but not unkind. You look prepared, Sundar replied, folding his hands. I am. He waited. You knew I'd come? I hoped you would. It was the only part I couldn't calculate. You always were good at finding the cracks. She smiled slightly. We used to build together. Now you build systems. I build questions. He leaned forward. You planted a device in a Tesla dealership? Triggered a breach in Zurich. Accessed classified quantum encryption. What are you really doing, Annika? Her eyes met his. What? I warned you about a decade ago. We're standing on a bridge made of glass, and you kept running forward, faster, building more on top of it. I just chose to stop and look down. And then what? Destroy the bridge? Break it for everyone? No, she said. I wanted to make sure we don't forget we're standing above something fragile. We've stopped asking if we should and only ask if we can. Sundar looked at her carefully. You used to say that building smarter machines would help us become better humans. I did, she nodded. Until I realized we weren't trying to be better. We were trying to be faster, safer, more predictable. We replaced kindness with convenience, awareness with automation. And now we trust the machine more than we trust each other. He was quiet for a long time. You think this is the way? He asked. Hacking systems? Sending threats? Terrifying people? I never harmed anyone, she said softly. I designed the breach so no one would be hurt. No real data was stolen. No damage to physical systems. All we did was hold up a mirror. To what? To power, she answered. To how it listens. Or how it doesn't. Sundar sat back. Then tell me what this is really about. Annika took a breath. Walked to one of the monitors. Tapped it gently. A grid came into focus. Faces. Thousands of them. Citizens from across the world. Faces of all ages. Smiling. Frowning. Some confused. Some afraid. This is what our systems watch every day, she said. Retina tracking. Emotional recognition. Behavioral prediction. We promised them security, and we gave them surveillance. They chose it, Sundar replied. We built tools. They made the decision. You gave them no other path. She said, her voice harder now. You built the road. You placed the signs. You closed the exits. People don't know what privacy means until they've lost it. He looked away for the first time. She continued. I'm not trying to bring it all down. I'm trying to force a pause, a reset, to remind the creators that just because they can write code doesn't mean they can write the future for everyone. He turned back. You think that's my intention? No, she said. But it's the outcome. The words landed heavily. Because he knew she was right partly. Not entirely. But enough? You had a message delivered to me, he said after a moment. You said this was only the first test. What's the second? She walked back to the table and placed a small drive in front of him. This contains a blueprint, she said. A new framework for ethical design, for AI, for data. It's radical, open source. It forces accountability at every layer. It won't make shareholders happy. It'll slow down development. But it might save us. He stared at the drive. What do you want me to do with it? He asked. Take it, she said. Read it. Think about what you want your legacy to be. Not your success, your impact. He didn't reach for the drive. Not yet. And if I don't, he asked, then we disappear, she said simply. And others will come, maybe not as gentle. Maybe not with warnings. He looked at her for a long time, past the face, into the intention, the pain, the brilliance, the fear. All still there. Then he finally picked up the drive dock in California. He returned to the quiet of his office. The world hadn't noticed he'd gone missing for 36 hours. Meetings had been rescheduled. The press had no idea. Everything was normal on the surface. But he felt different. Emily waited outside. Did she tell you what she wants? He nodded. Yes, and more than that, she made me remember something. What's that? That we don't build systems. He said, we build choices. And when we stop seeing them as choices, we lose ourselves. She looked at him carefully. So, what now? He held up the drive. Now we test the system. But from the inside. A week later, Sundar walked onto a stage to deliver a keynote address. The room was full. Investors, press, developers, students, the future. All staring back at him. But he didn't start with product updates. Instead. He told a story about a man who walked into a dealership in disguise, who watched how people treated. The invisible who saw the cracks in a perfect room, who was given a chance to pause, to rethink. And as the story unfolded, silence swept across the room because it wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about what kind of people they wanted to be. At the end of his talk, he said only this. We can keep building what works, or we can start building what's right. And in the corner of the crowd, someone smiled. Annika Reddy got unnoticed. But not unseen. Asterisk.